God loves government, and He loves us. He loves our cities too. God loves cities, and He has a strategy for economic development in your city, in my city,
Totally.
and He has a strategy for public safety, for homelessness in our cities. He cares about those people that are wandering on the streets that don't have a place to lay their head at night. He cares about the mentally ill. He cares about our infrastructure, just our wildfire mitigation, all those things that we in a community need. The Lord has a solution for that.
He does.
And so we need our people to go in and love this city well. We have as much influence as we have love. If we don't have love, we don't really have a lot of influence.
Welcome to Cultural Catalyst, where we teach you how to be fully live, co-labor with God, and change the world. And I'm your host, Kris Vallotton. And today I have my very good friend, Julie Winter.
I'm so glad to be here, Kris. Thank you.
I was going to say Dr. Julie Winter, but you're actually a physician's assistant.
I'm a nurse practitioner.
A nurse practitioner.
There is a difference.
Oh, wow. All these years and I still get it wrong.
You still get it wrong.
You know, when I introduce you normally, you don't even correct me.
I just let it go.
Yeah. I think I've introduced you as a scientist, a doctor, everything probably except for a veterinarian. But anyway, you've been my friend for a long time. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, it's a privilege.
I want to tell this story. You and I, you've been my doctor for a while. And I went through a very hard time 15 years ago. I was laying on the couch for 6 months, depressed.
I remember.
And you called me every single day. I've told this story many times, but not in your presence that I know of, at least. I didn't know you were in the room if you were. And you called me every single day for 6 months. And I was pretty desperate. And I just want to say publicly thank you, because I've never got to publicly thank you for that.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Kris. It was an honor. And it was just a season that you were in, and I'm a longtime friend. I was your caregiver, but also on the board, and I was just going to go with you through that valley of the shadow of the death. Make sure you didn't stay there.
And it's a little humorous now, but if you've ever talked to somebody who's depressed, it is not a fun conversation. And our conversations were probably 30 seconds to a minute long. How are you doing? Terrible.
Yeah.
Feeling better than yesterday? No. Yeah. It's like, and it's hard to talk to somebody when that's the conversation every week. But you really saved my life. And the last couple of months of that time on the couch, I was really contemplating not living. And you kept reminding me, like, this isn't forever. This is going to happen.
Right.
You're going to get well. And just thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. It was an honor.
It's hard to talk to people who are in pain, isn't it? And you deal with them every day.
It is. It's something that you just have to go in and embrace. It's just kind of like stepping into the deep water or going into the ocean. You just embrace it and you go in with people and be with them where they are. This
is not our subject today, but I just feel prompted to say this. Like, if you have people that are your friends or loved ones and they're in pain, I want to say you don't have to fix them. They just have to know you're with them. And I think that it's probably one of the things you learn in medicine, right? You can't fix everybody, but you can give them hope. You can be there for them.
Right.
And I think most people run from pain. I think it's pretty natural for us to run from pain, especially when you don't know what to say, you don't know what to do, and you don't have a cure.
Yeah.
And just, in my life, I learned so much from that incident with you. I had about 3 people call me. Most of them call me 2 or 3 times a week, call me every day. And I think what I learned from that for my own team, when they're sick, they always get a text message, a call, or something from me, because I learned how important it is to stay close to people. I don't have to have an answer.
Right.
I don't have to have a cure.
Right.
That's not my responsibility.
Right.
But I can say I'm with you, and that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, we can all do that. We don't have to offer the solution. Most of the time, people just want to be heard. They want to be loved. They want to know you care and that you're with them.
Yeah, and so we're going to shift subjects because that really wasn't our planned subject, but I did want to say that, just really thank you for that. Okay, so you're in medicine,
I am.
and you're also on city council. You were our mayor.
Mm-hmm.
It's a,
Lots of hats.
A whole lot of people.
What different
were
hat
like,
am I going to put on today?
How
Yes.
the heck did you get from from medicine, nurse practitioner, to how did you even connect the dots?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, what the heck are you doing in city council, and what got you there? And I know your story, so this is a loaded question. Like, how did what you're doing in medicine? How is it helping you? I don't think people would connect these dots actually.
Yeah.
In city council, and let's talk about that. That's a good starter. I got a bunch of questions on that.
Absolutely. So some of this is your fault. So I'll just we'll joke.
Hey, don't kill the mailman.
Because I don't know
Don't
how you connect the dots either. But somehow you had a straight line. But I came to Reading. My husband and I moved to Reading in 1989 when our boys were just babies.
Wow.
And we came up here. It was a new graduate from the NP program at UCLA, and so started practice here. And I've been in several different settings here in Reading in family practice. My husband was offered a job at Mercy Medical Center. We started attending Bethel Church when it was over on Bocelli Lane before Bill. So yeah, I know.
You were after the Earl days though, right?
I was after the Earl, but before Bill.
Yeah.
And so, and then we, moved into the building that we're in now. And Bill, of course, came in 95, and you came a few years after that.
Yeah.
So we have been friends that whole time. I've served on the Bethel Elder Board for quite some time. And so I have fulfilling medical practice. I have a pretty huge patient panel.
Yeah, you do.
But also,
I keep you busy myself.
yeah, super excited about, and I still wake up with this thought that Bill Johnson threw out to us early 2000, more than 20 years ago. What does it look like to have a city transformed by the kingdom of God? And that follow-up statement, I believe that city is Reading. And that seed began to grow in my heart, as you know, and I began to think about that and chew on that, because as being trained in medicine, I'm trained to look at root problems, not just symptoms of a disease, but what's actually causing the disease. So looking at our city and thinking, well, why do we struggle economically? Why do we have high divorce rates? Why do we have high domestic violence rates, crime, the things all our ACEs scores? What does it look like to have a city transformed? And I began to dream about that.
Yeah.
If the church was the church and was salt and light in our community, what would it look like to have a city transformed? And I probably you could probably remember, I began to agitate for that strategy sitting on our Bethel Elder Board.
Yeah.
So what are we doing as a church? What's our strategy? How are we going to make the city better? And, thinking of the different areas of influence in the community.
How can we be a catalyst?
How do we be a catalyst? And so,
I thought I'd get that in there.
So in a board meeting, you probably remember this well. I think
do.
it was 2010, 2011. I was agitating for something. I don't even remember what it was. And you turned around and looked at me and kind of pointed your finger at me in front of God and the whole board, said, you're going to be on the city council. You're supposed to be the mayor. And so that was, which I didn't connect the dots. I'll say that right there. I didn't see.
You didn't like that word very well.
I was not happy. I was mad.
Yeah.
Like really mad.
Hey, don't kill the mailman.
You were very
I
gracious.
just delivered the letter, baby. I didn't write it.
You did. Within a month, I had received that same prophetic word from my youngest son and from my father. Neither of one who had ever brought up government in me running for government, being involved in government at all, but they each had a word from the Lord for me. So I'd received 3 words within just 30 days or so. So I knew what God was talking to me about it, but I was stubborn and didn't want to listen, didn't want to even talk to God about it. So I didn't pray about it.
You are still quite
I was
stubborn.
So I just set that aside for about a year, but it caused a separation between the Holy Spirit and myself, him not wanting to talk to the Lord about it.
That's a good point.
So I began, that really grieved me. I knew I was being disobedient. And the Lord was gracious, but I was being disobedient. So one morning I just repented and said, well, Lord, all these people want me to run for city council. They tell me this, they tell me that, but I don't think I should. And these are all the reasons I shouldn't. And all the Lord asked me was, well, if I asked you, would you do it? And, well, I mean, how do you say no to that? if I asked you, would you do
can
it?
say no, but
But
you
it
can talk
did.
to
It wouldn't
Jonah
be
about
good.
that.
Yeah, exactly.
Talk to Jonah
I
about
knew
that.
that.
There's a
Yeah.
whale of a problem right
Yeah,
there.
I was smart enough not to run to the ocean.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
get on a
You
boat.
don't want to even get in the bathtub after that.
Exactly. So that began that moment of repentance, and I felt the Lord say, "I'm on this. Trust me." And so I said, "Yes, Lord, I'll do it." And I felt like I kind of had jumped off a cliff, and I had that sensation of falling. What did I do? I'd wake up with that every morning, and it wasn't.
Like
it was
actually a physical sensation.
I had that sensation like you're just going over the edge of a roller coaster and you're falling.
It's like kind of anxiety, maybe, or
Yeah, it was like a
being
night.
out of control.
It was a nightmare.
Nightmare.
It was like, did I say that? Did I say that yesterday? Yes, I did say that yesterday. I am going to run, and I'm the type of person, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it well. So that obviously created quite a bit of pressure for me. So I began that whole process, and I did tell the Lord, I'll do this, but you have to make a way for me. I required two things. You have to make a way, and you have to show me how to do it. And I'll trust the timing to you. And so that was 2010, 2011 or so. And so it took me a while. I did leadership writing. I interviewed probably over 100 business leaders. I actually created a survey of what were the key
this is your
barriers
style.
to success.
I want to point out something right here before you run off.
Okay, sorry.
No. I just want to point out, because there's a lot of people listening and they're like, hey, I'm in some other practice. I do something else for a living. Mm-hmm. And it's like the Lord called me to whatever. Right now we're talking about you in city council.
Right.
But it could be whatever. And it's like, what do I do?
Exactly.
What do I do? And I'd like to point out that, for instance, when Daniel was called to serve Nebuchadnezzar, he had to learn the history of Babylon. He had to learn the language of Babylon. He had to learn the government of Babylon, the culture of Babylon. And so I watched this process with you. You gave yourself to learning. I know you were going to city council meetings after a while.
I was.
You were talking to people who had done it before, people who were still doing it, people who understood the problems of the city. And you were doing like what a good doctor would do, who's trying to solve a patient's issue, who maybe has been to many doctors and hasn't been able to solve their issue.
Right.
You were diving into, how does this work?
Yep.
And you didn't just run one day.
Right.
And that was, I think that was a couple-year process.
It was. It took me. I didn't run. I was elected in 2016.
Yeah,
so I started my
campaign.
campaign. Yeah, it was a 4-year process, and I think that's important for people who are listening. And you get a prophetic word for something, you need to lean into that. Like I'm not sure if it was you who said this, but God isn't responsible for fulfilling your prophetic word.
Yeah.
Like, there's a part of it that you do, that you step up and do, and that whole principle of the horses prepared for battle, but victory belongs to the Lord.
Yeah.
When we get that prophetic word, we can't just say, well, God's going to make it happen. No, you usually have to prepare a horse.
Absolutely.
You have to get a horse and then prepare it.
Yeah.
So I would say that because I see
It's
some
a
people
metaphor.
who say...
We have horses. Try not to get horses.
Right, exactly. So I threw myself into it and approached it like I would any medical problem. I tried to do evidence-based, what works in the city. I went up to, on my own dime, went up to Bend and had interviewed with some of their key city leaders and talking to people about how did they turn their economy around. Evaluated cities that had turned themselves from an economy that was based sort of on, which we had been on, resource extraction and then services, and then how do they pivot and become successful? So
as lumber kind of went away and mining goes away.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So then what do you do as a city? And Bend, that happened with Bend as well. And
Was this an identity thing too, right?
It was an identity, and we
you attract
talked
a
about
certain
that.
kind of person.
Yes.
You attract the logger, you attract that kind of person. We're not saying good or bad. We're just talking about the kind of person you.
Right.
And those people create the culture.
Yes.
So when that goes away, those people slowly go away.
Right.
And you're left with the vacuum, not just of jobs, but of identity, right?
Right. Exactly. And if you looked at, the EDC, our local economic development corporation, has lots of data. So you look at jobs that have the most economic output.
Yeah.
That would be manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, a lot of the IT sector, those kinds of, and then, it kind of works down the scale. So the hospitality service industry tends to be on the lower scale, or retail tends to be on the lower economic profit. But someone in
not high paying jobs.
And they just that turnaround money, they don't necessarily employ people, but people, that come in that are in tech or advanced manufacturing, their job brings in so much outside money into the community. You get way more turnover of your dollar or generation of dollars. So begin to look at what could that look like, and begin to pray about that and asking the Lord, where do I go? What direction do you want me to take? And the Lord directed me to Nehemiah.
Yeah.
So I spent a long time there, weeks in Nehemiah, and there's just such a fabulous story of someone who wasn't a king, who wasn't in the church, he wasn't a prophet, but he comes in and restores a city, and he does it pretty quick.
Yeah, and rebuilds walls and gates, and he's also not a contractor.
Exactly.
Which is a crazy story, right? 114 years the walls are tore down.
Yep.
They try to rebuild them for 72 years.
Yeah.
And what they can't do in 72 years, he does in 52 days.
In 52 days. Yeah, less than 2 months.
And he does it. He doesn't bring in the Army Corps of Engineers to do it.
Right.
He does it with the very people who tried for 72 years.
And who actually had a lot of the resources there.
Exactly.
They had broken down walls. They had stuff. They just didn't know how. They didn't have vision. And I was really struck. When I approached Nehemiah, I told the Lord, I said, okay, help me to see this as if Nehemiah is in my time. Nehemiah is coming to Reading.
Yeah.
And so help me look at Reading like Nehemiah looked at Jerusalem. And so I just put myself on that journey of looking at Reading's, and Nehemiah went and investigated the gates.
He
went at
surveyed
night.
all the walls.
He surveyed all the walls. He had names for them.
Yep.
I got hung up on the names. I was like, why are we talking about the names of walls or gates? And so then I felt like the Lord say, well, ask me what the walls of Reading are. What are the walls that are broken down? And there were quite a few. But I asked the Lord, I said, okay, give me the top 3 or 4 that I'm supposed to focus on, because there's so much a need in the city. What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to be the catalyst for? And the Lord gave me a strategy that is still my strategy today. Sometimes it gets tweaked, it changes, but the core strategy has been there.
Yeah, I love it. And then he also gets help from the kings.
Yes. Yes.
And so he brings in some resources they didn't have, but he uses the same people.
Yep.
And what's interesting here, and I think this relates to you as you're in the medical field as a doctor, and it's like, okay, so you have this, you're bringing this mentality. You work with sick people all the time. Mm-hmm. It's a mentality. Mm-hmm. Like, you work with sick people. Your job is to get the sick person actually well. And so you come in with that diagnostic kind of mind. Right. And you're like, okay, our city's sick. Right. So the same kind of mindset. Right. I survey the walls. I have tests. I take tests. My patients. I give my patients these tests to see what are the outcomes of these tests and how can I treat this disease. Mm-hmm. Right. And I saw you face Reading with a very similar approach, and I see Nehemiah the same kind of thing. He's diagnosing the problem, like what's wrong, what's actually wrong, and why are these walls broke down. But he also brings some outside help in that he's bringing some resources. And you did that too. You started bringing in resources. Connecting.
A lot of it is just connecting resources.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the things that the Lord really impressed on me, and you and I talked about this quite a bit, and we had quite a bit of conversation about vision for Reading. What is Reading supposed to be? And the Lord showed me that was one of the primary walls that had been broken down. The city didn't know what their purpose was. There was no identity. And if you don't know who you are, then for lack of vision, people perish. That's what the word says. And so our people were perishing because they didn't know who they were. They didn't know what they should be. And so I began to speak that. I began to speak about a vibrant, prosperous city that was good for families, that appreciated its natural resources, that was a safe city. So I began speaking into that and trying to give the people vision of what we could become. And I still do that today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just looking, yesterday we had a prayer meeting. We have a prayer meeting for our city and our government every week, just an hour and a half long. And I remembered that I had made some proclamations myself, like in this area of identity.
Right.
And I wrote some phrases down, like Reading, the place where dreams come true.
Yes.
Yes. Reading, the doorway of hope to California.
Yeah.
Reading, the healthiest city in America.
Yeah.
Like we just began to proclaim these core values over Reading.
Yes.
And then ask ourselves, how do you create ecosystems? Because the challenge is, right, we had some of these long conversations, when you have timber and you have, gold mining, mineral mining, it's not just guys cutting down trees. There's a whole ecosystem.
Right.
There's a mill.
Right.
There are truck drivers.
Right.
There are sawmen.
Right.
It takes all of this to have an ecosystem.
Right.
And when all that goes away,
right,
and you don't have that, what are you?
Yeah. Yeah.
And how do you create? So talk to us about, we talk so much about, technology,
Right.
and all of that. And how are you helping to create ecosystems with this new sense of identity around revelation, around beauty, around.
Right. Well, I it comes back to that beautiful biblical principle of stewarding your talents. What did God give you? What did God give our city?
Yep.
So we are surrounded by natural beauty. We have this river that runs through the middle. You can do almost any sort of outdoor activity you can think or dream of in Reading, within an hour of Reading, if it's not within the city itself. We also have this amazing resource of people, many of whom who come because of Bethel. They come from all over the world here. Well, people are that's a talent. People in many cities are looking for talented people to come to their city. So people come with their dreams, with resources, with maybe a different perspective because they were from a different city, a different nation, and they have started businesses here. So we have really worked on focusing on what do we have, how do we grow what we have, as opposed to people would tell me, well, we can't do such and such here because we don't have such, or we can't do this because we don't have this. And I said, well, what do we have? Let's just be faithful with, maybe we only have 3 talents, but let's multiply those. Exactly. And so that's what we've done. So we have focused a lot on parks and trails, and you probably see me advocate for that. You have been a great partner with our students, setting up that whole system of our students going in and cleaning up our parks and trails, and having a huge value for expansion of that, because talented young people who we want to attract here for skilled labor want to come to a place where they can raise a family that has a wonderful outdoor lifestyle. And we are an outdoor lifestyle type city. So that's one of the things that we've done. We have focused on downtown. Our downtown was really just dilapidated. It was empty. It was vacant. It was not
a little ghost townish.
It was, and we. It was a Mr. I think it's James or John Gardner said, we are continually faced with a series of great opportunities that are brilliantly disguised as insoluble problems. Yeah. So often what looks like a big problem, like downtown, became this incredible opportunity. And I pushed on that. So working with the private sector, which that you talk about that 3-legged stool, you have business. And then you absolutely have to have government, because government was heavily involved in all of the infrastructure and the streets and property line changes and all deeds, and then you had the nonprofit or the nonprofit sector, like K2, that contributed money. So you had these three different groups coming together to transform downtown, and now downtown is vibrant. You have new businesses there. It's amazing. You think of the Turtle Bay. I got very involved even before I was elected with that. We had the Turtle Bay Museum, which is a beautiful resource, but it didn't have funding. It was the city had cut funding during the Great Recession, so they didn't have enough money to maintain themselves. So they proposed taking that the city sell them a unused parking lot to build the hotel. And so that looks like a problem. Turtle Bay can't support it, and the city doesn't have enough money to support it. Okay, so what do we have? Well, we have an unused parking lot. Let's use that. And that turned into the Sheraton.
It's amazing.
A Mosaic, and that is a catalyst for that area. I mean, when you go down to the riverfront, that's where people are at. They're by the bridge. They're by Turtle Bay. They're by the Mosaic, Civic. So those are problems, and I believe the Lord has what we see as homelessness that feels like
Yeah.
an insoluble problem.
Yeah.
Actually, there's probably some great opportunities for there. We just need to set our mind to that.
So good. And then you became a part of a board for a technology company because
Yes.
we were like, okay, we can bring technology in. I know that you worked with several city council people and outside people, as you just pointed out, in the three-legged stool idea to bring in fast internet into our city because that's if you're going to bring technology into a city. I mean, it sounds crazy, but you have to. These are some of the infrastructure things you don't think of until you bring these companies in, and you're kind of showing them around, and they're like, "How fast is your internet?"
Yeah.
And you're like, we can't centralize. IBM's not going to have a centralized office here if they don't have fast internet because their whole world depends on it.
Right.
You guys are bringing that infrastructure in.
We're
tech school and
we're working on with the tech school. I mean, when I survey business owners, the top reasons weren't. It was funny because when you talk to the people on the street, they would say, well, the main reason Reading is unsuccessful is because of crime. Well, our crime is an issue, but if you look across the state, Reading wasn't particularly worse than any other city. Same thing with homelessness. It feels like that here.
better in most cases.
And better probably if you travel, you would probably see in California that Reading is probably better. But when you talk to business owners, I surveyed business owners and said, what is your number one, what are your top problems? And it wasn't public safety. It was they couldn't recruit a skilled worker. The second problem was lack of regular air service. All we had when I was elected was the San Francisco flight. So remember, I came to you and we talked about how can we get that LA flight? The business owner said we need to have regular flight service. We need that LA flight to get people in and out because many businesses need to have air service for their business to prosper. So that became a whole outreach that we did. That was a great story.
Yeah,
I don't know if you want to tell that story, but that was
they had tried for 2 or 3 years. I mean,
more than that, 10 years.
Yeah. Well, I got involved like 3 years. We had I had one of my guys regularly on that board, which was on that team that was trying to open up that LA. And just for people to understand what we're talking about, we're not just talking about an airline. We're talking about opening up another area to fish in for economy. So when you have a flight to LA, you suddenly open up a whole economic area that can feed our small community of Reading.
Right.
And both economically, also people can come here for recreation. All of that opens up, but without that flight, it is difficult to get here. So we got together. You talked to me, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm pretty good at negotiating. I'm like, well, let's find the right person at United Airlines because that's the airline that was already here. Let's make sure we're talking to the right people, and let's fly there. And let's negotiate a deal. And we set up a preliminary phone call before we got there, and we said, hey, we're ready to come to make a deal. So please have the right people in the room. Yeah. Ended up costing us $1 million, if I remember correctly.
Yep, it did.
Mm-hmm. And we raised $1 million. Bethel gave a significant amount of that. So did some business folks in the area. And we got that flight.
Yeah.
We got that flight we actually made the deal right there.
We did.
In fact, we actually said, we're not leaving here until you make a deal with us. You remember that conversation?
I totally remember.
And he's like, well, we don't usually operate like that. And I go, we didn't fly all the way here to not get a deal. Let's do this.
Yeah.
And I remember in your conversation with them, they were like, well, we would need you to take the $1 million risk. We said, okay, if we put up the $1 million, will you do the deal? And they're like, yeah, if you put up $1 million, we'll do the deal. Yeah. So we walked out of there with a deal.
We did. We walked out of there with a deal. And you were so brilliant, Kris, because what the city had tried to do, along with the EDC, all well-intentioned, they had tried one avenue of up the chain of command with United Airlines. And it was the only avenue they had access to. So they would get to a certain level, but the right people wouldn't be to make the decision, weren't in the room. And you diagnosed that right off the bat. You said, you just don't have the right people in the room. And Bethel had access to a different chain of command to the top because Bethel uses United Airlines a lot. So it's just a brilliant, when I think about that partnership of government and the church, and how do we, nonprofits, how do we as believers, why it's so important for us to get involved, because of some of those, me saying yes to the Lord, saying yes, I'll serve my city because I want to see a city transformed.
Totally.
For my children, for my grandchildren, for all in perpetuity, I want to see our city transformed, and so I'm going to pour myself into that. And then how do I connect it, to the church and giving people opportunities, a place to get involved and make a difference.
I think, one of the beautiful things for people who are watching here, that you provided is you became a bridge for us because we were already doing some stuff in the city, but we needed that conductor, the person who conducts the symphony. Like
Right.
we need to understand what's going on, and we need to bridge between. In our case, our nonprofit obviously is a church. And now we don't, but there's Advanced Reading that we started later on that we are not directly affiliated with, but we
Right.
started that corporation. But we needed someone who could bridge those two areas and say to the city, hey, there's resources over here. I'm on this board.
Right.
And, in our case, we have an army, right? We have
Right.
2,000 students in our school ministry who we do city, they have to work in the city every.
Yeah, it's been transformational. For our city.
Transformational. We've got equipment, in those days we had some extra money. And so, you were able to, because you were on this board and then you became city council, you were able to build that bridge. It kind of like, I'm relating it to Nehemiah, who he serves the king, right? And he ends up, in Jerusalem, King Artaxerxes in another country, but that king extends his favor to these nations around him to give him resources.
Yes.
And you in your analogy, I see now that you get in city council and you're like, I know these.
That's right.
I know these.
I know where the
kings.
resources are.
Yeah, I know where these resources are, and obviously Bethel's not the only resource you know about,
Right?
Because you're involved in all these other. You're involved with the metal community, and that opens the door to all these business people. But you're like, okay, you get in there, and you're like, oh, we have a problem with homelessness. We have a problem with this. We have a problem with that. You know what we have? I got an army over here. I'm on this board of a church that has an army that would love to see our city transform. And you're able to pull those resources in, like Nehemiah did with the kings.
Yeah, it is. It's that's why we have to be salt and light, and we have to love our community. I just think it's so. We often, as the church, I think of government as being dirty or politics as being dirty, but something we should pull out of and not be involved with. Not realizing that. God loves government, and He loves us. He loves our cities too. God loves cities, and He has a strategy for economic development in your city, in my city,
Totally.
and He has a strategy for public safety, for homelessness in our cities. He cares about those people that are wandering on the streets that don't have a place to lay their head at night. He cares about the mentally ill. He cares about our infrastructure, just our wildfire mitigation, all those things that we in a community need. The Lord has a solution for that.
He does.
And so we need our people to go in and love this city well. We have as much influence as we have love. If we don't have love, we don't really have a lot of influence.
I think that it's real easy to get polarized with for example, you're a pro-lifer and you're like, well, our mayor or our city council or our governor or whatever is a pro-choice person, and it's like I let that separate me, and I'm like, all right, and I begin to throw stones at that, and I'm like, I'm not saying change your values. I am saying, Nehemiah, especially Daniel, Joseph, Esther, they all love the kings, even though they obviously did not agree with them, and I think that love builds bridges.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then love, you only have as much influence too as they have value for you. So when you start loving people, you start loving your city council, you start loving your board of supervisors, you start loving some people that you're like, it doesn't mean you agree with their stances on things.
That's right.
But it opens the door for influence, and then you can bring kingdom solutions because you're not seen as an enemy.
That's right.
But I think that so many times, and I know, and let me add this. That was the biggest challenge we had during COVID. Like, it wasn't the challenge some people thought we were having. We weren't having the challenge. We were having the challenge of masks or no masks, vaccines or no vaccines, open or closed. We were having those. But the greatest challenge we were having is how do we stay connected to the people we've spent 22 years building relationship with,
right.
who are trying to have a healthy city, whether they're doing it right or doing it wrong. I think we'll look back 20 years from now and we'll go, yeah, we didn't do that right, or we should have done that differently. But when we're in the midst of it, we're trying to protect our relationship with our city.
Right.
We weren't just trying to protect our relationship with our congregation.
Yeah.
And that became very complicated. And of course, people were throwing stones at us all the time, like, why aren't you open? Or why didn't you do this? Or why didn't you do that? Or it's like, if we were just doing our congregation, we would have acted very differently.
Yeah.
But that's not what we were doing.
I think it all comes back. It comes back again to love. For God so loved the world, He gave His only Son. And
how do you love your city well?
How do you love your city well? And Jesus said, greater love hath no man than he that lays down his life for his brother. So how do I lay my life down? I don't have to agree with your politics or your view on something, but what can we work on together? You love the city too. I love the city. How do we bridge and make this a place where, families can prosper?
And you're not an enemy because you view the vaccine differently.
No.
You're not an enemy because you view wearing a mask differently.
Right.
Like I don't want to separate my world into bad people and good people.
Right.
Because as you just point out, Jesus died for the world.
Yeah, He died for the world.
So we end up with an us and them mentality, and all the things we're talking about here they all happen through relationship.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't walk in the city and go,
relationship.
hey, we'll like to clean up your parks for you. And they go, there you go. You got some tractors. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
Compassion, empathy, listening, understanding.
Yeah.
We don't have to come to agreements, but we should come to understandings.
Right.
And we should honor each other. Like that's the way you view that. Your journey took you to that place. You're a doctor during the COVID season. So you were seeing people really, really sick, many of them dying. So that puts you in this really strong perspective of, hey, this is what needs to happen.
Right.
And then you have people on the other side of that, and you're just trying to navigate. Okay, how do we walk together? It
was a challenging time. Very challenging. Trying to keep our love on.
Trying to keep our love on.
Trying to keep our love on, that is a demonic entity that we face, where we want to pull away. There's that sort of that religious or political spirit that is affecting our society, and affects the church as well. And we tend to want to be tribal. We tend to want to be in a camp and surround ourselves with people that agree with us. But that's not the real world, and that's not. Jesus didn't act like that. Like Jesus went into all the places. He spoke to the rich. He spoke to the poor. He spoke to people who were very religious. He spoke to the prostitute. He loved really well.
Yeah.
So much so that, the whole world was turned upside down by him.
And they invited him to his parties, even though
They did.
Even though he was the only guy at the party who never sinned.
What if we were known for that? Like, what if we were known in the church as being that, oh man, I want to have them involved. I want them at the table. They have the best ideas. They're so loving. They're so gracious. They're so kind. They don't judge. They actually have it's those values, because the kingdom values prosper everywhere. Those are the values of heaven work in any society. Honor, love, integrity, fiscal responsibility, stewardship, all those kinds of things work.
I had this vision of people putting on glasses, of all of us putting on glasses, and it was like they were divided in the middle, and it said bad people, good people, wrong people, right people. Then I saw us taking those off, and I saw those, like, this is how we sort. Like, we actually, we don't even have to consciously sort. It's just like, this is how the world sorts. Those are the wrong people. Oh, you have a relationship with the wrong people? You must be a wrong person too. And then I saw these rose-colored glasses come on, and I'm like, oh, this is the way the Lord sees the world.
Yeah, with rose-colored. Wow, I love that. Rose-colored glasses.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
He doesn't see the Democrat, the Republican, the liberal, he sees people he loves.
Right.
In various forms and condition with heaven.
Yeah.
So, man, I could go on and on. We're getting excited here. We should keep this dialogue going. We should do this again in another month. But thank you so much for serving Reading. I so appreciate you as obviously my friend, but also as our city council. Of course, the Lord wants you to run again, which you are not. So you can your prayers. Bring your prayers. Bring your prayers. Julie thinks she's done after 2 terms. I don't know about that, so you have to really speak to her. And just talk to the Lord very strongly about that. No, on a
I'm
serious
open.
Yeah, I know you are. I'm just being funny. But thank you so much for serving. God bless you. God bless you. Get involved in your city. Love people. Start with prayer. The Lord served thousands. He fed thousands with a little boy's lunch. Your little bit matters. You are a catalyst. You're a catalyst to a culture. Just bring what you have and do it with love, and you'll see a change and transformation in your city. God bless you. Have a wonderful day.